Have you ever wondered why, even in the middle of chaos, you suddenly feel a calm presence settling over you, almost like something invisible is holding your heart steady? What if I told you that presence isn't random and it isn't far away, but it's closer than your breath right now? Before we begin, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because the message you're about to hear has the power to shift the atmosphere of your entire spiritual life. You're about to realize that God's presence isn't something you chase from a distance. It's something you carry, something that surrounds you, fills you, strengthens you, and breathes through you in ways you've never fully noticed. Sometimes you go through your day thinking God is somewhere else, some distant place in the sky, but deep down, you've always sensed something different, haven't you? Something in you whispers, there's more. God is nearer than I think. And today, you're going to understand that whisper on a level so real, so personal, and so powerfully intimate that it will change the way you wake up, pray, walk, work, and face your storms. Because the truth is, God has never been a faraway God. His presence has been woven into every breath you take, every step you make, every moment you thought you were alone, and every tear that rolled down your face when no one else understood what you were fighting through. You've been surrounded by Him all along, even in the moments when you felt like you were barely hanging on. Even right now, as you're listening, there's something inside you awakening, a recognition, a reminder, something deep pulling you toward Him. You're not imagining that. That's His presence stirring your spirit, nudging your heart, calling you back into the awareness that He's been walking with you from the beginning. Because when God says He will never leave you nor forsake you, He doesn't say it poetically. He means it literally. And the more you learn to live in the awareness of His presence, the more you begin to notice what's been true all along. That peace isn't something you search for. It's something you step into. Strength isn't something you desperately try to build. It's something He breathes into you. And guidance isn't something hidden behind mystery. It's something He whispers into the quiet spaces of your heart when you slow down enough to listen. You've spent so much of your life trying to find God through noise, through stress, through the weight of daily battles, when all this time, God was never missing. He was simply waiting for you to notice how close He already is.
And when you finally begin to notice Him, really notice Him, everything in your world begins to shift. You start to understand why certain moments felt lighter than they should have, why certain doors opened that you didn't have the strength to push, why certain storms didn't destroy you even when you thought they would. You begin to realize that grace was not an idea, it was a force wrapped around your life. And right now, as you breathe in and breathe out, that same grace is surrounding you, filling the atmosphere around you with a quiet strength that doesn't always announce itself, but never leaves your side. You might not always feel Him emotionally. You might not always sense something dramatic, but the presence of God is not defined by your feelings. Your feelings rise and fall, but His presence remains steady, unwavering, unchanging. It sits on your life like a promise that cannot be broken. So many people believe that encountering God requires a certain place, a certain song, a certain moment, a certain spiritual peak. But what if the most life-changing encounters don't happen on mountaintops or in massive breakthroughs, but in the softest, simplest moments of awareness? What if God is speaking to you even now through the silence in your mind, through the calm settling into your chest, through that gentle realization that you're not alone and you've never been alone? Because God's presence doesn't wait for you to become perfect. It doesn't wait for you to pray perfectly, worship perfectly, or live perfectly. God meets you exactly where you are, in the middle of your mess, your doubts, your fears, how His presence doesn't condemn you, it comforts you. It doesn't shame you, it restores you. It doesn't judge your wounds, it heals them. And maybe right now you're carrying something heavy, something nobody else knows about. Maybe you've been feeling exhausted, overwhelmed, or uncertain about where your life is heading. But let me tell you something you need to hear. God is not just watching you go through this. He is walking with you through it. He's closer than the fear in your chest, closer than the confusion in your mind, closer than the pain you're trying to hide from the world. He's closer than your own breath. And the moment you understand that, everything starts to feel a little less impossible. There's a reason you're listening to this right now. Out of every video you could have scrolled past, every sound you could be hearing, you're here because God is pulling you into awareness. He's reminding you that His presence is not an event, it's a lifestyle. It's not an experience that shows up once a year during an emotional moment. It's a reality that follows you into your kitchen, your job, job, your car, your quiet nights, your lonely mornings, your victories, and your heartbreaks. God's presence isn't something you search for, it's something you tune into. And in this moment, He's drawing your heart, softening your thoughts, opening your understanding, preparing you for something deeper than what you've known. Because when you learn to live with the awareness of His presence, you stop living from panic and start living from peace. You stop reacting from fear and start responding from wisdom. You stop feeling abandoned and start feeling anchored. And that's what God wants for you. Not just moments of His presence, but a lifestyle shaped by it.
You're going to notice something powerful begin to happen as you step deeper into this awareness. Moments that used to overwhelm you will start to lose their grip. Situations that once triggered anxiety will feel different, lighter, almost as if someone else is carrying part of the weight for you, because someone is. You'll begin to sense a quiet strength rising inside you, not because life suddenly became easier, but because you finally stopped trying to walk through it alone. God's presence reshapes the way you handle pressure. It realigns your priorities, steadies your emotions, sharpens your perspective, and brings you back to the truth of who you are and who He is. You'll start to recognize that the reason certain storms didn't break you wasn't luck. God was there. The reason you bounced back from disappointments that could have ruined your joy wasn't your own resilience. God was breathing resilience into you. The reason your heart didn't collapse under the weight of certain losses is because God was holding it together even when you didn't realize it. That's what His presence does. It becomes your unseen support system, your invisible shelter, your quiet strength in the background of every battle. And the more you acknowledge Him, the more clearly you'll begin to hear Him. His voice isn't always a thunderclap or a dramatic sign. Sometimes it's the gentle thought that interrupts your fear. Sometimes it's the peace that settles in right after you almost lost control. Sometimes it's the random burst of hope that hits you at the exact moment you needed it. Sometimes it's the clarity that appears after a long night of confusion. And sometimes it's the simple shift in your breathing, the stillness in your spirit that reminds you God is here. That's why He says in His word, "Be still and know that I am God," because stillness awakens awareness. Awareness awakens connection, and connection awakens transformation. When you quiet everything around you long enough, you begin to feel the reality of His closeness in a way that no sermon can fully explain, no person can fully describe, and no circumstance can take away. But let me take you deeper, because awareness doesn't just change how you feel, it changes how you live. You start to walk differently when you know God is beside you. You start to talk differently when you know God is guiding your words. You start to fight differently when you know God is strengthening your hands. You start to dream differently when you know God is working behind the scenes. Awareness shifts everything. You stop begging God for signs and start recognizing that He's already speaking. You stop asking, "God, where are you?" and start saying, "God, I see you." And imagine living with that confidence every single day. Imagine waking up already knowing you're not facing the day alone. Imagine going to sleep with the peace of knowing the presence of God stands guard over your heart and mind. Imagine walking into difficult situations with an inner boldness that whispers, "I am not alone. God is with me. God is in me. God is for me." This is what happens when you learn to live in God's presence. Not just believe in it, not just hope for it, but live in it. And this is where your transformation truly begins. Because once you realize God is closer than breath, you stop living from fear and start living from faith. You stop rushing through life and start moving with purpose. You stop feeling empty and start feeling filled. And even if your circumstances don't change immediately, you begin to change. And that's the beginning of every miracle you've been waiting for.
You're going to feel this truth settle deeper into your spirit as we continue, because the presence of God doesn't just comfort you, it activates you. It wakes something up inside you that has been quiet for too long. It revives your confidence, restores your identity, and reminds you that you were never meant to walk through life depending only on your own strength. When you truly understand that God is closer than breath, you start to see that you were created to live from a place of divine partnership. You're not operating solo. You're not carrying the weight of your dreams or your responsibilities by yourself. God is working with you, not behind you, not in front of you, but with you. And when you begin to live with that awareness, every part of your life becomes infused with God's quiet power. Think about it like this. Have you ever walked into a room and suddenly felt peace, even though nothing external had changed? That's His presence. Have you ever faced a problem that should have broken you, but somehow you found strength that didn't make sense? That's His presence. Have you ever been in a moment where you wanted to give up, but something inside whispered, "Not yet, keep going"? That's His presence. And the closer you get to Him, not physically, but spiritually, the more obvious it becomes that He's been guiding you long before you realized it. God doesn't need a dramatic moment to show up. His presence is woven in to every second of your existence. He's there when you're laughing, when you're crying, when you're confused, when you're overwhelmed, when you're celebrating, when you're broken, and even when you've drifted so far that you don't recognize yourself anymore. His presence doesn't retreat when you struggle. It surrounds you more tightly. You're about to hear a story that will help you understand just how powerful this truth can be. There was a man who spent most of his life feeling like God was far away. He prayed, but he felt nothing. He worshiped, but his heart felt numb. He went through his days believing that God was somewhere beyond the clouds, distant, unreachable, too holy to be close to someone like him. And because he believed God was far away, he lived like someone who was alone. He carried his own burdens. He tried to fix every problem by himself, and he fought battles he wasn't strong enough to fight. And over time, he became exhausted, not just physically, but spiritually and emotionally drained. One night, after another long day of feeling completely overwhelmed, he sat on the edge of his bed with his head in his hands, and for the first time in years, he whispered, "God, where are you?" He didn't expect an answer. He didn't expect a miracle. He didn't expect anything, but something happened. Something so gentle, so subtle, that he almost missed it. As he sat there in silence, he felt the smallest shift in the air around him. Not a wind, not a sound, not a vision, just this quiet, almost invisible weight of peace settling on him like a blanket. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't loud, but it was real. For the first time in years, he felt like he wasn't sitting there alone. And in that moment, an understanding washed over him. God had been there the entire time. The man didn't feel God because he was waiting for the wrong kind of moment. He expected fireworks when God was whispering. He expected a supernatural sign when God was offering supernatural closeness. And with tears rolling down his face, he realized he had mistaken silence for absence. That's something you might be feeling too. Maybe you've looked at seasons of your life and thought God wasn't there, but the truth is, He was closer than you knew. Sometimes the presence of God comes wrapped in stillness. Sometimes it comes without emotion, without goosebumps, without anything dramatic, but it comes and it stays. This is why the Bible says in Psalm 34:18, "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit." Notice something powerful. It doesn't say God becomes close when you pray hard enough or worship long enough. It says He is close, constantly, faithfully, silently but surely. You don't bring God near, He's already near. You simply become aware of what has always been true. And once this awareness becomes a part of your identity, you start to move differently in life. You stop begging God to show up and start opening your eyes to see that He's already here. You stop questioning whether He hears you and start recognizing the ways He responds even in the quietest moments. And you stop feeling like you have to fight every battle on your own, because you finally understand that God is standing beside you in every moment, closer than your breath.
And when that truth finally sinks into your spirit, something inside you begins to unlock. You begin to understand why the enemy works so hard to distract you, overwhelm you, rush you, and fill your mind with noise. Because the moment you become aware of God's presence, fear loses its power, anxiety loses its grip, confusion loses its voice, and hopelessness loses its authority. The enemy's greatest weapon is not your circumstance, it's your disconnection from awareness. Because if he can make you forget how close God is, he can make you feel outnumbered, outmatched, and out of strength. But the moment you remember, wait, God is right here. God is with me. God is in this room. God is surrounding me. That moment becomes the shift. That's when peace rises. That's when courage returns. That's when clarity shows up. That's when you move from survival mode to victory mode. This is why the presence of God is not just a spiritual concept. It's a weapon, a shield, a lifeline, a source of power that turns ordinary people into extraordinary warriors of faith. And maybe you've been asking God for answers recently. Maybe you've been begging Him to show you what to do, where to go, how to handle what you're facing. And maybe you've been feeling frustrated because heaven seemed quiet. But listen to me, God's silence is not distance. Sometimes God becomes the quietest when He's the closest. Sometimes He steps back from speaking so you can learn to sense, not just hear. So you can learn to walk with Him, not just wait for instruction. So your spirit can learn to lean on His presence, not merely on His words. When you were a child, someone needed to hold your hand for you to walk. But when you grew, you learned to walk even when no one was speaking, even when no one was guiding your every step. Yet their presence still mattered. Their presence still made you feel safe. God works the same way. Sometimes His voice guides you. Other times His presence carries you. But He is always there, whether you feel Him or not. Let me take you deeper into the story of that man. After that quiet moment of peace settled over him, he didn't suddenly become a perfect believer. He didn't wake up the next day full of overwhelming spiritual power. But something had changed, something small, but life-altering. He no longer woke up assuming God was far away. He began to open his eyes in the morning and say, "God, thank you for waking up with me." He would sit in his car on the way to work and whisper, "God, I know you're sitting here with me." He started making room for the awareness of God's presence in the ordinary parts of his life. And day by day, something inside him began to heal. He felt lighter, stronger, more grounded, more hopeful. He didn't feel the need to constantly ask God, "Where are you?" because he began to realize that God had been asking him a question all along. "Do you see me here with you?" And as he learned to see, recognize, and acknowledge God's presence in the small moments, the big moments began to make sense too. And that's exactly what's about to happen in your life. You're going to start noticing God in places you never noticed Him before. You'll feel Him nudging your heart when you're about to make a decision you'll regret. You'll feel His comfort when anxiety tries to creep back in. You'll feel His strength filling you on days when you're drained. You'll notice His peace come out of nowhere in the middle of chaos. You'll begin to walk with an inner quietness, a supernatural steadiness, a confidence that doesn't even fully make sense, because you'll realize, I'm not walking into this alone. God is literally right here with me. And when you live with that awareness long enough, it becomes impossible to go back to your old mindset. You can't go back to panic when you've learned to live in presence. You can't go back to fear when you've tasted closeness. You can't go back to confusion when you've seen clarity. You can't go back to emptiness when you've recognized fullness. Your spirit becomes anchored. Your heart becomes steady. Your mind becomes renewed. And your life becomes aligned with God in a way that elevates everything you do. Because here's something you need to hear with your whole heart. You were created to live with God, not just believe in God. Believe is the foundation. But awareness is the relationship. Awareness is the connection that transforms everything. And as we continue, you're going to experience this truth in a way that becomes unshakable inside you.
And as this awareness grows inside you, something beautiful begins to happen. You begin to see your life through God's eyes. You begin to look at challenges not as threats, but as opportunities for God to show His strength. You start viewing detours not as delays, but as divine redirections. You start realizing that every moment you thought was wasted was actually part of a larger plan. Because when God is close, nothing in your life is random. Nothing is meaningless. Nothing is overlooked. Every tear, every prayer, every sleepless night, every moment you pushed through, God was right there recording it, strengthening you through it, stitching purpose into the pain you felt. And maybe there were seasons when you thought God wasn't listening, but now you're beginning to understand that He was closer in those silent seasons and in the loud ones. Your spirit learns the most in the moments that feel the most still. Your heart grows the strongest in the seasons that feel the most empty, because that's when God fills you in ways you don't even realize until later. And this brings me to one of the most profound things Jesus ever said. In the middle of your journey, in the center of your questions, you need this truth planted deep inside your soul. Lo, I am with you always, even to the end of the age. Matthew 28, verse 20. Always, not sometimes, not when you feel holy, not when you're doing everything right, not when you're emotionally strong. Always. That means God is with with you right now in this exact moment. Whether you feel Him or not, whether you've been consistent or not, whether you're confident or struggling, His presence doesn't depend on your perfection. It depends on His promise. And God does not break His promises. That verse is not poetic, it's literal. Jesus didn't say, I will be. He said, I am. Present, ongoing, continuous. You aren't waiting for God to get close. He's waiting for you to notice how close He already is. One day, the man from the story walked into a storm he never expected. He lost someone he deeply loved. The kind of loss that shakes the foundation of your soul. The kind of loss that makes you question everything you ever believed. And for the first time in a long time, he felt like he might collapse under the grief. But something surprising happened. Instead of falling apart completely, he felt held. It wasn't dramatic. There were no visions, no voices, no supernatural experiences, but there was a stability inside him, a grounding, a quiet strength that he couldn't explain. He realized that the presence he had learned to acknowledge in the calm had become the anchor that held him in the storm, because that's the power of God's presence. When you cultivate awareness in the peaceful seasons, you begin to walk with supernatural resilience in the painful ones. That's when the peace of God becomes more than a comforting idea. It becomes a force pushing back against the darkness, trying to consume you. And you're going to experience that too. As you grow in this closeness with God, the storms in your life won't disappear, but they will lose their ability to destroy you. The waves may rise, but you won't sink. The winds may blow, but you won't be shaken. The attacks may come, but they won't break you, because presence becomes protection. Presence becomes strength. Presence becomes clarity. Presence becomes endurance. And the closer you walk with God, the more you begin to carry a confidence that says, no matter what comes, I am not going through it alone. God is closer than breath. He is here. He is holding me. He is guiding me. He is guarding me. And once that becomes real inside you, fear loses the ability to make decisions for you. Worry loses the ability to control your emotions. Stress loses the ability to dictate your days, because the presence of God becomes the atmosphere you live in, not something you occasionally visit. And a moment is coming, maybe sooner than you think, when you'll look back and realize that the closeness you're learning now is preparing you for blessings you're not even aware of yet, because God always prepares your spirit before He blesses your life. He strengthens your heart before He opens new doors. He aligns your steps before He shifts your path, and His presence is the preparation you didn't know you needed.
As you keep walking in this awareness, you'll start to notice that God's presence doesn't just influence your internal world, it shapes the world around you too. Doors will begin to open that you couldn't force open before. Opportunities will appear that make no logical sense. People will be drawn into your life who carry exactly what you need for the season you're stepping into, and you'll realize none of it is coincidence. God's presence attracts favor. God's presence attracts alignment. God's presence attracts clarity, direction, and divine connections. When you live with Him, truly live with Him, your life starts to move in rhythm with His purpose. You stop being in the wrong places at the wrong times. You stop settling for things that were never meant for you. You stop chasing what isn't aligned with your spirit. Because when you become aware of God, you become aware of what is and isn't from Him. And something even more powerful happens. You begin to hear His guidance more clearly. God doesn't shout, He whispers. And the quieter your soul becomes, the louder His whispers feel. You'll be in the middle of a decision and suddenly feel a tug that says, not this. You'll be walking towards something that looks good on the outside, but feels wrong on the inside, and His presence will pull you back. You'll start recognizing red flags you used to ignore. You'll avoid heartbreaks you would have walked straight into in the past, because presence produces discernment. Awareness sharpens your spiritual senses, and when God becomes the voice you listen to, your life becomes the life He can bless. You won't always know why He says no, but you'll trust that His no is a form of protection. You won't always understand why He closes certain doors,
but you'll trust that closed doors are divine detours. The closer you walk with Him, the easier it becomes to trust Him, even when things don't make sense. Let me tell you something that will change the way you see God's presence forever. God is not only close to you, He is invested in you. He cares about your day. He cares about your decisions. He cares about your relationships, your dreams, your responsibilities, your frustrations, your hopes, your inner battles. He's not watching from a distance. He's participating from the inside. The breath in your lungs is a reminder that God is not far away. Every inhale is a whisper of His nearness, and every exhale is a reminder of His faithfulness. You've never taken a breath that God wasn't in. You've never walked into a moment where God wasn't already waiting for you. You've never stepped into a situation where God wasn't prepared to guide you through it. That's how close He is. And as you soak in this truth, something in your spirit begins to rise, a confidence, an identity, a spiritual boldness that only comes from knowing you're backed by heaven. You don't wake up feeling alone. You don't walk into rooms feeling insecure. You don't step into challenges feeling unprepared. You begin to carry yourself with grace because you know God is walking with you. You speak with authority because you know God is guiding your words. You make decisions with peace because you know God is directing your steps. Awareness becomes identity. Identity becomes confidence. Confidence becomes power. This is what happens when you live in the presence of God. You become aligned with who you were made to be. The man from the story experienced this too. Once he began to live with awareness, something in him changed. Not outwardly at first, but deeply inside. He found himself responding differently when people tried to provoke him. He found himself calmer in situations that used to trigger him. He found clarity in moments that once felt confusing. He stopped reacting from emotion and started responding from presence. And the people around him noticed. They couldn't explain what was different, but they could feel it. That's what happens when God is close. His presence becomes visible through you. Others begin to feel the peace you carry. They sense the strength in you. They notice the hope in your tone, the steadiness in your spirit, the confidence in your decisions. You become a reflection of the God you stay close to, and you're stepping into that same transformation. Whether you realize it or not, the closeness you're learning right now is preparing you to carry God's presence into your relationships, your family, your job, your dreams, your community, your future. You won't just feel God, you'll reflect Him. You won't just receive peace, you'll become a source of it. You won't just experience strength, you'll walk in it everywhere you go. Because the presence of God doesn't just fill you, it flows through you.
And as that presence begins to flow through you, you'll notice something extraordinary. You begin to change the atmosphere around you. You'll walk into rooms that feel heavy, and suddenly the heaviness will start to lift. You'll speak words that bring comfort to people who didn't even know how to express their pain. You'll carry a calmness that makes others feel safe without you even trying. You'll bring wisdom into conversations without forcing anything, because when God is close to you, He becomes close through you. You stop being just a person in the room. You become a vessel, a carrier of God's peace, God's clarity, God's compassion, God's strength. You'll notice people opening up to you without knowing why. You'll notice friends and family saying things like, "I feel better when you're here." That's not you. That's God in you. And the beautiful part is, you won't have to strive for it. You won't have to try to impress anyone. You won't have to pretend to be perfect. You'll simply show up, and God will do the rest. This is the transformation that happens when you live in God's presence. Anxiety begins to fade because His peace becomes your baseline. Doubt begins to shrink because His voice becomes your foundation. Fear loses its grip because your confidence is rooted in something unshakable. And as you continue to awaken to this closeness, you begin to walk in a spiritual rhythm that aligns with heaven. You'll go through your day with a quiet awareness. God is here. God is guiding me. God is strengthening me. Even when life gets loud, even when circumstances feel overwhelming, you'll find a stillness inside that nothing can touch. That's what the presence of God does. It gives you peace that doesn't make sense, power that doesn't drain,
and joy that doesn't depend on what's happening around you. There's something else you need to understand deeply. God's presence is not a reward for good behavior. It's not something you earn by praying enough, reading enough, or performing well enough. It's a gift, a promise, a reality built into your identity as His child. God doesn't move closer to you when you're doing everything right, and He doesn't move away when you're struggling. His love is not conditional, and His presence is not fragile. You can't scare Him away with your mistakes. You can't disappoint Him enough to make Him leave you. You can't push Him far enough for Him to give up on you, because His presence isn't based on who you are. It's based on who He is. And He is faithful even when you're not. He is present even when you're distracted. He is steady even when you're wavering. He is committed even when you're inconsistent. His presence is the most constant thing in your entire life, whether you realize it or not. You know that moment the man had? The moment he realized God was with him in stillness? That wasn't a one-time encounter. It became a lifestyle. And the same will happen for you. Imagine yourself waking up and immediately feeling that sense of divine nearness before you even check your phone, before you think about the day ahead, before the stress returns, before any thoughts can overwhelm you. Imagine knowing before anything else, God is with me right now. Imagine making decisions with the certainty that God is guiding your mind. Imagine going through difficult days with an inner peace that refuses to break. Imagine walking into opportunities with confidence because you know heaven is backing you. Imagine facing challenges with a strength that surprises even you. This is not fantasy. This is what life looks like when you live in awareness of God's presence. And let's be honest, you've already felt it before. You've had moments in your life when you felt a peace that didn't match the situation. Moments when you felt comfort, even though everything around you was falling apart. Moments when you felt hope rise up out of nowhere. Moments when you felt clarity after confusion. Moments when you felt protected, even though you didn't know how things would work out. Those moments weren't random. They were reminders, glimpses, gentle taps on your heart from a God who has always been closer than your own breath. He has been guiding you longer than you realize, holding you longer than you've known, speaking to you in ways you didn't always recognize. And now you're becoming aware. Now your eyes are opening. Now your spirit is awakening. And once you awaken to His closeness, you don't go back to living life on your own strength, because living without awareness of God's presence is like holding your breath underwater. It's suffocating, it's exhausting, it's unsustainable. But living with awareness of His presence feels like finally coming up for air, like oxygen filling your lungs, like life returning to your spirit, like peace soaking into your bones. You were not created to live disconnected. You were created to breathe with God, hear with God, walk with God, think with God, and move with God. This closeness is your original design. And when you step into it fully, everything else begins to fall into place.
And as everything begins to fall into place, you'll notice another profound shift. You stop trying to control everything. You stop forcing outcomes. You stop stressing over timelines. You stop panicking over delays. Because when you're truly aware of God's presence, you trust that He is not only with you, but He is ahead of you. You realize He's already in the places you're worried about. He's already preparing answers to the questions that keep you up at night. He's already fighting battles you don't even know you're going to face. And that realization sets you free from the weight of trying to figure everything out. You start living from a place of surrender. Not the weak kind of surrender that gives up, but the powerful kind of surrender that rests in God's strength. The surrender that says, God, you see what I can't see. You know what I don't know. You are working where I cannot work. And because you were close, I trust you completely. That kind of trust doesn't come from religious effort. It comes from intimacy. It comes from closeness. It comes from knowing that God is not out there somewhere. He is here. And the closer He becomes to your awareness, the more your heart begins to align with His. You start noticing God in the little things. The way He softens your heart towards someone you used to be angry at. The way He redirects you before you make a decision you'd regret. The way He gently convicts you when your attitude starts to slip. The way He reassures you when insecurity tries to creep in. You start to see His fingerprints everywhere. In conversations, in opportunities, in moments of peace, even in challenges. You start to experience Him not just as God, but as as Father, Helper, Counselor, Friend. You stop seeing him as distant and start seeing him as deeply involved in the smallest parts of your life. And that's when your relationship with him becomes real. Not routine, not religious, but real. The man from the story discovered this in a way that changed his entire life. One morning, months after he had begun practicing awareness, he woke up feeling heavy again. Life had thrown new problems at him: financial stress, family issues, uncertainty about the future. And for a moment, he felt the old panic rising again. But this time, something was different. Instead of spiraling into anxiety, he closed his eyes, placed a hand over his chest, took a slow breath, and whispered, "God, I know you're here." And instantly, the weight on his shoulders began to shift. Nothing external changed. The bills were still unpaid. The problems had not disappeared. The uncertainty was still real, but his spirit changed. His heart softened. His breathing slowed. His mind steadied. Because presence doesn't always change your circumstance, it changes you in the middle of it. And that inner change becomes the beginning of outer breakthroughs. And you're learning to do the same. You're learning to stop running from stress and start bringing God into it. You're learning to pause instead of panic. You're learning to breathe with awareness instead of fight alone. You're beginning to catch yourself before negative thoughts spiral. You're beginning to feel his peace rise up inside you even when life doesn't make sense. You're beginning to understand that awareness isn't about feeling something. It's about knowing something. Knowing that you are held. Knowing that you are guided. Knowing that you are protected. Knowing that you are strengthened. Knowing that God is not inches away. He is intertwined with your very breath. And that brings us to something crucial. When God is close, you stop living for approval. You stop shrinking yourself to fit into places you've outgrown. You stop begging for validation. You stop apologizing for who God is shaping you to be. Because once you experience the presence of God deeply, you stop needing the presence of everyone else to validate your worth. You start valuing your peace more than people-pleasing. You start valuing your purpose more than popularity. You start valuing your growth more than comfort, because the presence of God becomes your source, not people, not praise, not performance. You start walking with a quiet confidence that doesn't shout but speaks louder than anything you could say. And people will feel it. They'll see the difference in you. They'll recognize the strength you carry, not because you're trying to prove anything, but because God's presence is radiating through you. And here's something even deeper. When you're aware of God's presence, you stop being afraid of the future. Not because the future becomes predictable, but because you begin to trust the one who already stands in your tomorrow. You stop fearing change because you know God is in the change. You stop fearing loss because you know God can restore. You stop fearing failure because you know God can redirect. And you stop fearing the unknown because you know God is already there waiting. That's the power of closeness. It replaces fear with trust. It replaces anxiety with assurance. It replaces stress with surrender. And it teaches you to walk into the future with a confidence that can't be shaken. You're not just learning information in this moment, you're being transformed. God is rewiring the way you think. He's reshaping the way you see the world. He's renewing your mind,